Hello everyone, my name is Bradley and this is Sumsub, a channel about how to survive in the online jungle. Now in my previous videos, I've talked in detail about how to disappear once and for all without leaving a trace. And one of the basic rules here is that the new life should be totally unremarkable. If you want to totally disappear, then you ought to get used to attracting as little attention to yourself as possible. Hide behind a mask of an inconspicuous resident of a big city and disappear into the crowd of ordinary people, right? But what if you don't want to deny yourself anything in the new life? What should you do if you've accumulated a considerable amount of capital and now you want your new life to be one of luxury and unrestricted freedom? Is it really possible in the 21st century to become the new Count of Monte Cristo, a rich man who appeared from nowhere without revealing the secret of his origins?
That's 72,519 stones in my walls. I've counted them many times.
But have you named them yet?
Well, today I'm going to tell you all about how fugitive oligarchs cover their tracks. Now, do you know this person?
No.
Well, he went down in the history of criminology under the name D.B. Cooper, but his real name was never actually uncovered. In 1974, on the eve of Thanksgiving, he hijacked a plane off the American company Northwest Orient Airlines. A very polite terrorist handed the crew a note threatening to detonate a bomb and demanding $200,000 in 20s. Along with the money, Cooper demanded delivery of 4 ordinary parachutes. FBI agents complied with the criminal's demands and exchanged the money and parachutes for hostages at Seattle Airport. After that, the plane took off towards Mexico with the terrorists still on board, and the mysterious D.B. Cooper was never seen again. He jumped out of the plane with the money somewhere in the vicinity of Portland. It was only a few years later that they were able to find a couple of bundles of the stolen money, but more than $190,000 disappeared without a trace. Now, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, this is approximately 1.3 million modern dollars. Today, you might be surprised to know that around 56 million people in the world are fortunate enough to be millionaires. So what if one of them decides to start their life afresh? So this brings me to the first supposition of our thought experiment. My new character, D.B. Taylor, is not hiding from the police or the mafia. He earned his $2 or $10 million in a relatively honest way. He could have been engaged in something like the production of alcohol somewhere in Malaysia or built call centers somewhere in India. It's just important to note that Taylor lives under the radar. He's not a politician or a showbiz star, hence he never attracted the attention of journalists. His photos weren't splashed across the front pages of tabloids or featured on the news, right? And finally, he has no heirs or disgruntled business partners. This person simply decided to disappear and used one of the methods I described in the last video to do so. The problem is that it is extremely difficult for a person without a past or history to become part of today's open world. Or maybe it's not so difficult. Well, that's what we're going to be looking into. So without further ado, it's time to welcome Count Monte Taylor. By the way, in preparation for this video, I was wondering whether it's actually possible to buy an aristocratic title these days. And as it turns out, yes, it is, and it's even quite inexpensive. In fact, you yourself can become a lord or lady for a mere 36 euros. This is exactly how much it costs to buy a plot in the picturesque Glencore Valley in the north of Scotland. Now, with that money, you can, of course, only buy 1 square foot of land, but that's enough to officially become a Scottish lord. Of course, this is an honorary title only. You won't be allowed to attend a meeting in the House of Lords, but it will look quite impressive on a business card, especially on the other side of the Atlantic. And do you think this is a joke? Well, Americans don't think so. Perhaps you recognize this person. Now, this is Scott Disick. He's an entrepreneur and a participant in a scandalous reality show. A couple of years ago, he actually went down the route of purchasing himself such a title, and now calls himself Lord Disick. But what if you want something a little grander? Not a problem. You just have to spend a little bit more money. For example, it will cost £15,000 to become a baron from Buckinghamshire, and you can become the 27th Lord or Lady of Coates Bedun for just £3,250. And you know, these are real titles. To be honest, I even thought about such a purchase for myself for a couple of seconds.
You are truly the cruelest tyrant in the kingdom, your lordship.
Such a title can be very helpful for said D.B. Taylor to start a new life. After all, he needs to be earning something, right? Well, or at least he needs to create the illusion of earnings for banks and tax authorities. In most cases, you wouldn't be able to just transfer money from, say, in English to an American bank. AML employees will have too many questions about the origin of said funds. However, sometimes it is actually possible to legalize such money through the fictitious sale of equities, securing non-existent loans, and so on. Now, of course, we've already spoken about these methods more than once. But these methods have huge drawbacks, and if we're discussing them openly on YouTube, then you can be sure that the experts are more than aware of them too. So I'm going to come up with something new. The first thing that came to mind was to become a star of the wine business. Now, firstly, our DB Taylor is an English aristocrat, and who knows more about wine than English lords? And secondly, it's a solid and respectable occupation, which is easy to finance, by the way, from the funds of some offshore company. For example, a small but wealthy company from the Virgin Islands can order Lord DB Taylor to examine their wine collection, which is stored in the Luxembourg Freeport. The details of the contract, of course, are extremely confidential, but the amount is large and absolutely legal. So that AML experts don't even hold the slightest of doubts, for a couple of $1,000s, we will create Taylor's very own website and fill it with short reviews about expensive wines. Of course, we won't even have to try them. All texts will be written by hired copywriters based on reviews from the Vivino app, and also articles by real experts. We'll also spend some more money on promoting the site through contextual advertising. And once we've done this, well, the image of the new Critic is ready. The only weak point in this regard is that Taylor will actually have to genuinely master the basic concepts from the world of wine in order not to accidentally slip up in the clarity of Chablis. However, this isn't much of a problem because the necessary knowledge can be obtained in a matter of days via online courses. The WSET 2 level will cost about £300 and is more than enough to hold a decent conversation with most wine lovers and enthusiasts. In addition, the trade of elite bottles opens doors for DB Taylor to lead an active social life. Do you remember the brilliant story of the fraudster Rudy Kurniawan? Parties, stars, champagne splashes. But wait, I think I've got a better idea here. Splashes of champagne sometimes smell of gasoline, sweat, excitement, and huge budgets, right? I'm talking about automobile racing. Of course, like any British man, I've dreamed of gently stroking Formula One cars since childhood. You know, the cheapest tickets actually for a race at Silverstone now cost about €2,000. It's more expensive than some of those aristocratic titles I was speaking about. Indeed, expensive tickets to the Paddock Club can actually no longer be bought. And the incredible Lewis Hamilton has taken the interest in Formula One to a new height. So what if the name DB Taylor appears on the side pods of one of their teams? Well, it's more realistic than you think. The first advertisements on cars appeared in 1968. The Lotus team painted the car in the colors of the Gold Leaf cigarette company. For many years, tobacco and alcohol companies have spent almost more on the sponsorship of car races than the car manufacturers did themselves. The red and white colors of Marlboro, blue Mild 7, yellow Camel. I mean, the coloring of the cars from the golden age of Formula One was dictated by these tobacco giants. But at the beginning of the 2000s, the European Union banned such advertising, and in place of the departed corporations came rather strange slogans. Do you remember the T- scandal of Nigerian Prince Malik Ibrahim? Have you ever used the iTime app or the Sugarbook website? Well, these kinds of sponsorships, more often than not, are just an access all areas pass to the world of the rich and famous. The first time this was actually used was by an extravagant financier from Belgium, Jean-Pierre van Rossum. He claimed to have developed a mathematical module that reliably predicts the stock price. Van Rossum founded Moneytron, his own fund for trading on the stock exchange, right? And a sponsorship contract with a young team, Onyx, also helped him to look for wealthy clients. The team lasted only a year and a half in Formula One, but Van Rossum himself managed to raise capital of around $860 million. And since Van Rossum's time, and a lot of petrol later, sponsorship has become much more expensive. The teams keep the exact numbers of sponsorship contracts a well-kept secret, but a few years ago, the Daily Mail journalists gave some interesting figures. It turned out that even the most budget advertising on Lewis Hamilton's racing suit costs around $1 million. But really, that's not much for getting yourself a place on the uniform of a 7-time world champion, is it? I think that if I target teams that don't have quite as many championship titles to their name, I'll be able to take a prominent place on the suits of racers and cars for the same money. But advertising dubious investment funds or non-existent energy drinks is no longer accepted in Formula One. And therefore, I'm actually going to have to come up with a company whose CEO will be DB Taylor. I think it will be Social, Highly Technical Innovation Foundation by Taylor, or SHIFT for short. Now, here I'm going to use the famous Silicon Valley principle. Fake it till you make it.
This is what happens when you work to change things.
Look, the protagonist of our hypothetical scenario isn't going to conduct fraudulent activities or attract third-party investments like Van Rossum did. The Foundation's task is to provide a financial alibi. The sponsors of the organization will be offshore companies that actually hold Taylor's money. Part of the money will go to advertising in car racing, another part to simulate legitimate activities, perhaps some sociological research or demographic investigations. And hired copywriters will write articles about these studies. In addition, you could actually take advantage of hot topics floating around in the media. For example, the launch of a collection of digital clothing that will draw attention to the food crisis in Africa, or release a selection of NFT tokens with photos of endangered animals, right? Social problems and high technology are a recipe for perfect news. Taylor himself will of course be the main beneficiary of the company. But most importantly, he will have something to talk about over a glass of champagne at the Paddock Club. The only weakness here in the scheme is if one of the rich and famous people that Taylor befriends genuinely wants to sponsor SHIFT with real money. However, let's hope the lawyers will be able to delay those deals. Now, if you're rich, it becomes difficult to get lost in the world. Do you remember that in a past video I actually told you how to correctly get rid of a mobile phone? Well, being a millionaire makes things a little more complicated. For example, any network user can find out where your yacht or business jet is located right now. These things constantly transmit signals with their coordinates, and this information makes its way onto public databases and sites, and therefore you just need to go to marine traffic and you'll be able to watch the movement of millionaires in real time. And you know, getting rid of your favorite yacht is a bit more difficult than throwing away, say, an old iPhone. Now, I began to study this topic for a very good reason. Do you remember the name of the criminal with whom I started today's video? Well, D.B. Cooper made history not only by jumping out of a plane with a duffel bag full of dollars, but after this incident, the ladders of passenger aircraft began to be equipped with a special mechanism, and it was named the Cooper blade. Now, during the flight, the airflow presses against the blade, and this actually presses it against the hatch and becomes impossible to open it during flight. Now, simple invention prevented new attempts at hijacking planes. In any case, I hope my little thought experiment today will allow AML specialists to look into our world through the eyes of a potential fraudster. My name is Bradley, and it's been my pleasure to pilot you on this peacefully pleasant parade, Perry said prolifically passionate digital projections of the online jungle. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks for joining us.